This is Elena Mosaner, and welcome to Better You podcast. And today I am talking to Diane Musho Hamilton. Hello, Diane.
Hi, Elena.
So a little bit about Diane. Diane Hamilton is an author. She's an award-winning mediator. She is a conflict resolution expert and a teacher of Zen. She has practiced meditation for more than 35 years, and she's the author of this book right here, Everything is Workable, a Zen approach to conflict resolution. She's also the author of this book right here. It's a follow-up book, The Zen of You and Me, a guide to getting along to just about anyone. I love this book. And here's the third book. I just got this in the mail. I'm really excited about reading this. Compassionate Conversations, How to Speak and Listen from the Heart. So this is her third book. I haven't read it yet, but I'm excited. So I'm really excited about our conversation today. Welcome, Diane.
Yeah, thank you, Elena. I'm really happy to be here. I'll just plug my co-authors on the Compassionate Conversations. I wrote it with two of my younger colleagues, Gabe Wilson and Kimberly Lowe.
Oh, yes. That's
because we're exploring multiple perspectives in the book.
That's wonderful. Yes, I see three names here. Okay, so today we'll divide our conversation into three parts. We'll talk about Diane's mission and what brought her to this work. Then I have three questions to ask, and the third part will be about affirmations. We'll talk about 15-20 affirmations that we have designed. I actually compiled them from the book that I read, and they're all based on the teachings of Diane's work, and I'll just go over them. And these suggestions will be used later in the self-hypnosis audio session. Great. So this is where we are. Diane, I want to talk about your mission and the work that you're doing a little bit. And I'd like to say that as I was reading your book, one of the things that came to mind, it really reminded me of The Power of Myth by Joseph Campbell. Mm-hmm. And the times when I started filmmaking, how in film they often, in a very basic story, and that's in case our audience doesn't know, the hero often encounters an inciting incident, something dramatic that happens, and then they take on a new path. They go into a new world, usually a refusal of the call, but they go into the new world, and this is where they meet their allies, their mentors, and then they come back to their world, to their original world, to their community with their special teaching. And I feel like there is a parallel to that. And I'd like you to tell me what you think about it. And if you could tell us what the inciting incident was and what teachings you brought back to us.
Yeah, I think there is. I mean, I really find Joseph Campbell's Power of Myth to be just such an amazing journey. I remember watching that years ago. I don't know when it was produced, and some of his teachings and some of the images. I remember a snake priestess kissing a king cobra on the head in that series. There are really some amazing things. So yeah, in terms of a hero's journey, I can definitely look at it in that way. In my case, I suppose a heroine, which really has to do with how do we learn to sit upright and respond in a certain way with presence and with moments of courage and just a view of compassion in the world, the special teaching that can help us inhabit this life in a way that is full and wholehearted. Mm-hmm. So I think for me, probably the precipitating event was the loss of 7 of my friends when I was a junior in high school. So I was 17 years old. And between January and June, 4 of them were killed in February in a light plane. They all died together. They were 17 and 18 years old. And then I lost another one in an automobile accident, another one in a fight in which he was stabbed, and then a third one committed suicide. So my life went from being ordinary with the kind of ordinary ups and downs to a real confrontation with mortality. And what did it mean to be a human being in the face of loss and the face of death, because it wasn't something that I had really experienced. And then I just experienced it with a lot of repetition in that period of time. So in a way, it turned me away from the conventional concerns that one might have as they're about to leave high school, in my case, to go to college. But I became much more interested in what life itself is for. And you could say my father wanted me to be a lawyer. He always thought I was good at argument and had a rational kind of mind. But I think I moved away from relative law to absolute law, in the sense of the law of life and death.
Yeah. From relative law to the absolute law.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
That's really heartbreaking to have such incidents happen in your life at such a young age. You were 15 or so, right?
I was 17.
17, yeah. And so as I just started asking deeper questions, where did the journey take you from there?
Well, I started out, I was raised in, you could say lightly, in the Mormon religious tradition. And I went from there into philosophy. And I started to study philosophy in college. And philosophy just didn't close the gap. It didn't bring me into more wholeness. I was able to work with my mind. Mm-hmm. But at least the way Western philosophy was taught, it didn't close the gap for me. And it wasn't until I encountered the Buddha's teachings and I started to meditate that I felt the kind of gap between my life and philosophy closed. And suddenly I started to experience what was meant by oneness. And when I sat in meditation, I could feel it I didn't know early on what it was I was experiencing. And then I came to realize, I was no longer dividing myself from the world or my experience, and I was becoming one with it. And I felt what meditators feel, which was a tremendous sense of peace and contentment, in a way, that came from that practice. So that particular teaching and set of teachings was really, really important for me.
Mm-hmm. So you received your healing.
Yeah.
For the loss that you were experiencing.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. And it included that, one of the three important recognitions in the Buddhist tradition is, one of them is impermanence, that our life is precious because it's brief, it's fleeting. And so it included this sense that we have to acknowledge that, and how does that change who we are when we do?
Yeah. It's the impermanence, which is the continuation and loss and constant change.
Yeah.
And healing, the word healing means wholeness.
Yeah, I know.
Which is fascinating.
It's really fascinating.
And so how long did you spend studying and before you came back to start teaching and sharing your knowledge and teaching books?
I started studying when I was 22, 23, and I've never really stopped. Mm-hmm. So I would say what happened, and this is where my work as a mediator and a meditator kind of come together, is that, meditation taught me about wholeness, taught me what it feels like and how important it is. And mediation was just something that I was good at. And so it allowed me to manifest or enact wholeness, because as a mediator, you're always bringing disputing parties together back to oneness, you might say. And so I was hired as a mediator when I was about 30. And I spent most of my 20s studying and training. And then I started working in the world when I was 30. And so my own study and practice has been Zen, but my work has been in the mediation conflict resolution world. That's why my book is a Zen approach to conflict.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, it is. It's a very unique approach. That's why I was so drawn to it, because it is about healing. It is about wholeness. And how you said conflict is about division. And we do have this division within ourselves as well. We have conflicts with ourselves, within ourselves. Yeah, that's I wanted to ask questions, and as we speak, I have many questions, of course, but there are times when there is a conflict, and the natural urge for me to resolve it. I personally like resolution, and I can understand how some people would want that, but I also see how for some people it's not that important to resolve it, and it can be heartbreaking to process. So I was wondering, when you encounter that, and I see it in, let's say, in family and in life in general, when is it okay to just let the conflict be as is and either walk away from it or wait for it to come back one day? When is it okay? Or do you have to aim for resolution?
Well, let me just say a couple things. So it's kind of important to understand when we start looking at our own relationship to conflict that there are three basic conflict styles, which I'm sure you read about. And one style is to avoid. Another style is to accommodate, to kind of make it okay and adapt. And the other style, of course, is to compete or to challenge. And each of these styles actually is very appropriate in certain situations. So there are times when conflicts come up and you can just sort of feel that the best thing to do is kind of go around it, just walk away or just kind of, excuse yourself from the conflict because either it doesn't concern you or the timing isn't right, or there's kind of a complexity within the family that if you get involved, nobody's going to be holding any neutrality. And there are all kind of good reasons why a conflict should be avoided. And then accommodation, human beings are highly social. We cooperate insanely well. There's an ethnobiologist who says that human beings are really as convivial as ants and termites and bees. We live in these metropolises, these incredibly complex, with dense populations. And for the most part, we get along. Our attention is always drawn to conflict because it's dangerous. So we pay attention to it, but we don't pay nearly as much attention to how well we get along. So all of us accommodate. And sometimes just going along with someone's viewpoint or their preference is also appropriate. And then the final one is the issue of challenging. When does one enter the fray and be willing to have a fight or be willing to push communication or say, no, the status quo isn't okay. We need to look at this. And that can be really appropriate. Every one of them has a place. So it's just a question of becoming skillful. So one of the things I would say about what it sounds like you and I have in common is wanting to develop an ability to really talk about a conflict. And to be able to kind of, through understanding one another and maybe negotiating or trading off a little bit, to come to a solution. And
it feels good. It feels good.
Feels good. It's creative. It's relational. It's intimate. It can be uncomfortable, but it's highly intimate. And it also helps us to grow. So the one other thing I would add is that I tend to do that kind of work in conflict with other people who also want to do that kind of conflict work.
Okay.
So I have a whole group of colleagues and friends who, if an issue comes up, they're more than happy to talk about it and endure whatever discomfort might happen in the nervous system in order to have a good conversation and then to reach a conclusion in which we both share responsibility, or we all share responsibility. And it doesn't take a long time. It can be quick and really clarifying, and you grow in trust. But not everybody wants to do that. And so if they don't want to do it, you almost need to be in a position where, if you're a boss, for instance, you can say, let's do our best to talk about this. You can require it. But in family and even with our spouses and intimate others, we can make a really strong ask, but we can't insist,
But it looks like this is kind of an aim. The resolution is an aim, whether it is now with the skills that I have and the skills that I choose to develop, or if it's really not the right time, as you said, maybe the timing is not right, then maybe later, right?
Maybe later.
So, yeah.
Maybe later. I mean, I was in my first marriage. I think my husband was mad at me for 15 years.
Mm-hmm.
And it was uncomfortable. I didn't like it. And I wasn't able to talk with him about it. And then just in the last year during the pandemic, he's completely changed. He just suddenly, he's available now. And he just wasn't for a long time. He just was mad,
That's so interesting. You talked about him in your book, how you wanted to maintain a friendly relationship, but for some reason he was not available. And I read that and I kept wondering, I wonder what happened.
Yeah. Yeah.
So just talking, you're friendly.
Yeah. We're totally friendly now.
I remember I had one conflict a while ago, 10 years ago, with someone. And it's not something to be ashamed of. People also feel a little bit of shame about conflict.
Yeah, I know. Mm-hmm.
So just for me to say that, I became aware of the feeling. That's why I voiced it. But it was a conflict. And looking back, I can say that now I understand why there was a conflict. And it wasn't the right time to try to resolve. But because of my nature, trying to figure things out and resolve and get peace, I was trying to resolve it. But I was pushed away in the sense, and it was okay, it was okay. And maybe next lifetime. So this is one of those situations where you realize, it's okay to let go. And when you let go, the resolution in a sense arrives, in a sense that arrives in your body, in your psyche, and you get to understand your lesson. Like you mentioned, resolving conflict and talking about things, it helps us grow. But even if you let it stay there and stop pursuing, you can also grow.
Absolutely. Anytime you do something differently, that's creating more options for sure.
Right. Right. And then you can approach that from a different point of view if you meet that person again. And this is interesting because you talk about this in your book. You talk about it with your friend for whom you made a vase with the word mercy, some sort of a dish. And also with your friends, a number of your friends who called you all at the same time. And years ago, there was some sort of confusion, misunderstanding. You didn't know how to approach it. Then you looked at the statue of Kanzeon.
Kanzeon, in Japanese.
Mm-hmm. The goddess of compassion. And you did your prayer and the ritual, and then you all gathered together and you realized you didn't even have to talk about the past.
Yeah, exactly. Exactly.
It's so incredible. And this is one of the things I think we need to remember for those of us who can be persistent or wanting to resolve or wanting to arrive at an agreement, that if it's not happening right now, it's okay to let it stay. And it's okay to get your composure and your sense of presence, your alignment that you talk about, get into your own alignment without the other party, because the time will arrive. And that time, when it arrives, all of that trouble that you're thinking about may not even be that important in that moment.
So true.
Yeah.
But it's difficult sometimes to let go. We all have our preferences, and particularly those of us who really value our relationships and appreciate the intimacy. And then when things go awry, it really does feel like a disruption. It's very uncomfortable. And learning how to let go and discover that you are whole, even though there's a division. There's a division, but it doesn't mean you're not whole. And that if you can learn to rest in that wholeness, and as you're saying, allow the right time, allow the right circumstances, then lots of times things just resolve on their own with no effort from you.
Exactly, with some sort of divine intervention.
Yeah.
You talk about perspectives, and I really admire and appreciate your conversation about multiple perspectives. And I feel like, in a sense, it's an essence of the book, to become a multi-perspective person. And you're also a big fan and friend of Ken Wilber, who developed, we could say, the integral theory, and which kind of starts with spiral dynamics. And I know that in the developmental psychology and stages, in integral part, in the integral level, we could say level of development, which is not a level, we consider it not a level, but the accumulation of all levels, which is to say becoming multi-perspective, which is seeing the perspectives of all the stages below, of all the people from all different views on this life, different models of the world. So it's not easy to become a multi-perspective person, and
no. It's uncomfortable.
Yeah, it's difficult. And now this will be my third question, but with this, I want to talk about the first perspective, and how first perspective is part of being multi-perspective, and how important it is to be articulate. You talk about this, and this was very refreshing to me, actually, because I looked at first perspective sometimes a little bit as, oh, that's a little bit not a positive thing, but it's a positive thing. You talk about Martin Luther King, was passionate and articulate and well-spoken.
He said, I have a dream.
Exactly. Yeah. And
first person.
Exactly. First person. And I have a dream. It was so powerful and moving. And then you also mentioned about how you worked with some people that never had a chance to express their perspective because they were afraid.
Yep.
Yeah.
Yeah. In mediation, sometimes I would proceed to start to try to negotiate, and then I would realize that certain people couldn't take their own point of view. So some examples I think I gave is if you came from an abusive relationship, to really stand for yourself could invite abuse, so you might be afraid of that. Or if you come from a culture that really values the perspectives of old people, that if you're a young person, you might not feel empowered to speak up, or the reverse is true. If you're an old person, you don't feel empowered to speak up, or if you're marginalized in any way, you might not feel you can really take your own point of view. And it's a developmental achievement to really be able to stand up for what you think and what you want and what you need. And so it doesn't have to be the only perspective. We've all been in relationships with people where we feel like there's only one view and it's theirs. Yeah. And we've all had moments where there's only one view and it's ours.
and this is actually, I thought about Jordan Peterson, because he's a lot, about one perspective, and he speaks about the importance of learning how to write, learning how to read and educate yourself. He's extremely good with one person perspective and speaking well. So it's great. I remember being really interested in him. But when this one perspective, it looks like there is a light attribute of it, and there's the shadow attribute. The light attribute is something that we're talking about, and it's so important to work this out. And for those who are listening to us, we need to remember that we have to educate ourselves, read and write and express confidently. Yeah. But then this shadow attribute, it's when it becomes this self-righteous and rigid and pushy. What can we do when we encounter someone like that, and we just want them to hear us? We just want to teach them that there's compassion, that there's other perspectives, even though we appreciate yours. What do we do when we speak with someone who's very self-righteous to the point of even borderline becoming abusive?
Mm-hmm. Yeah. Well, everything we do needs to be guided by our intention. What is our purpose? Is it a family member who we want to remain close to? Is it a coworker where there was a mix-up and we're trying to clarify what happened? Is it a child for whom you want them to understand the perspective of being a parent? What is our intention? So it's very important to know that. And then once we do know that, I think there are two things that are really important. And one is to be willing to listen to the perspective that you're hearing first. It's an act of generosity and it's respectful. And if you can listen and reflect what you hear that stubborn person saying, and then it's very important to say, would you be willing to hear what I think about that? Mm-hmm. Because sometimes just getting permission creates a gap, and there's an invitation, but you're not demanding to be heard. You're just simply asking, are you interested? And then if they're not interested, then and you can close the conversation. And if they are, then you can appreciate them and say, well, here's what I'm working on. Here's how I'm thinking about it. This is what's important to me. Is that important to you? So if you're willing to kind of be generous enough to both take your own point of view and to take theirs, then sometimes you can build the scaffolding. Now, you know, every so often you can become impatient and demand that someone listens to you, and that can break out into a fight. That can be energetic. Rarely, but every so often you actually do break through, and somebody will start listening when you say, God damn it.
Yeah.
So if you're guided by your intention, and then you're willing to be generous and respectful, then there are lots of different ways to invite people to hear other perspectives.
So knowing your intention can help you connect with them, and it can help you go through these.
Yeah. If you don't know why you're doing it, it gets much harder. But if you know why, then you can say that. You can say, well, you know, you're my brother. And regardless of the politics on television and the way in which the media is automatically setting us against each other, I actually care about what you think and feel. And I want to be in relationship with you. And I don't want to just assume we have to be political enemies because the television stations tell us we do.
Interesting. So it's also important to actually state your intention. So first you get clear on
sometimes.
Your intention.
Yeah.
So I want to have a conversation with you because, let's say it's a daughter and a father. You know, I want to have a conversation with you because you are important to me. You are my father, and I want us to have a relationship.
Exactly.
Right.
Exactly. I can think of an occasion where you might not disclose your intention, but just hold it with yourself more.
Okay.
Yeah. But for the most part, I think it's helpful to share it because then it makes it clear, you know.
So either you share, or in some instances, just you can, you know, gauge and see if it's okay to just, you know, have it within you. Okay, good. So these are actually the steps. So you listen to the other person that you have difficulty speaking. You listen and you reflect. You might want to not parrot them, but paraphrase, right? And actively listen, and to let them know that you actually hear their perspectives.
Yeah, that's really the purpose of reflection, is just to let them know you heard them. I always tell my students, listening isn't about hearing what people say. It's about giving people an experience that they've been heard.
I've been practicing this quite a bit, and actually it also helps with my toddlers, my 4-year-old.
I bet it does.
Yeah,
they can feel it.
Yeah. So you're feeling upset, you're feeling angry, you're upset that this thing fell down, right? I can see it. Yes.
Yeah.
So, and just to remind our audience, so you reflect, you listen, you make sure you show them that you see their perspectives, and then their perspective, and then you can ask them, will you be willing to hear what I have to say? It may be a no, maybe a yes. If it's a no, you can close that. If it's a yes, then you have a discussion. Here's what I think about it.
Yeah. And then what'll happen is what could happen is that they'll start asserting their perspective again. And you can say something like, yeah, I hear that. Can I go back to what it was I was trying to say? Is it okay with you if I finish?
And you have to.
You can't be sarcastic.
Yes, you cannot be. Exactly.
Would you let me speak?
Yeah, you already stated your opinion and I've listened to it. Okay, it's my turn. No,
exactly. Because all the nonverbals are more immediate. We read them more quickly than we do the verbals. So any sarcasm or judgment or accusational tone, you know, gets us in trouble.
So Diane, this also brings me to something that I probably thought I wouldn't have time to talk about, but being rhythmic and being dynamic, because it makes sense right now. When we do talk with, we have a difficult conversation, we may get triggered. It is important to be aware of your feelings, as you said, which is in this book right here. This is something I've been teaching my clients, by the way.
Very good.
And I love it. The 4-step technique, where you become aware of your feelings. If you just in 2 minutes, tell us a little bit about that technique.
Yeah, sure. So one of the things that we're making a lot of progress with is that we're learning a lot about the human nervous system. And we've already understood the basic fight or flight mechanism. We have some rudimentary understanding of different parts of the brain, the really old part, the emotional limbic system that all mammals have, and then the prefrontal cortex, which all of our abstract thinking, mathematics, music, all of that is housed. And what happens is that when we're threatened, even by a difference in conversation, a political difference, or the different way you remember an incident happening, or a preference that you feel strongly about, as soon as a difference arises, it excites us. So we move out of the kind of rest, what they call the feed and breed nervous system, and we move more into the parasympathetic nervous system, which is where we're going to react, and we're getting prepared to move. We're getting prepared to defend, to take care of ourselves. And so what happens is the hormones start to shift in our bloodstream. So we start to what's the gland right behind the eyes?
Amygdala.
Yeah, the amygdala. It fires and signals the brain to drip adrenaline and cortisol and norepinephrine into the nervous system, which speeds us up and helps us become alert. We get very one-pointed. And even in conversation, that can start to happen. So one of the things that I feel that we're just not very good at is teaching people how much the body has to do with our poor conflict skills. Because a lot of what we're dealing with is not really what somebody else is saying. It's the sensations in the body that are telling us to take care of ourselves by fighting or fleeing. There's just this real arousal in the nervous system. So part of the work that I do is to help people really learn how to work with their body so they can stay in conversation. And so depends on how you formulate it. But 4 of the dimensions of this are, the first one is to simply say to yourself, it's okay. Because the body doesn't feel okay. It's all of a sudden feeling like something's really wrong. And so if you remind yourself it's okay, and then you can feel the groundedness of your body, like feel the sensations, feel gravity, just kind of let yourself get dense and feel what is in the body. And don't put too much effort in that moment into communicating, just listen, but really feel what's happening. And then you can use the breath to help to start to regulate the nervous system. And really what regulates the nervous system is some rhythm to the in-breath and the out-breath, so that the in-breath is the same number of beats. The out-breath maybe is slightly longer. And you do that, 2, and you can hear my voice is slowing down even as I'm doing it. This is hard. I feel all this. It's okay. And then as a 4th step, you can just feel the space around you, because one of the experiences of conflict when the nervous system is contracting to act is we get very claustrophobic. Yes. We want to get away and get out. It's like sprint muscles want to spring. And so because of that, it's really helpful to feel the kind of boundlessness of space, both inside of you and outside of you.
Yeah.
When you breathe and feel space, then your nervous system genuinely starts to relax again. And that you move out of the grip of that old defensive structure that is really keeping you from having a good conversation.
It's very, very therapeutic. It reminds me of also working with clients, teaching people deal with stage fright. And I often tell them that when you are in your head, when you're thinking, I'm not good enough, or I look horrible, or people are laughing at me, to get out of your head and just pull your focus outward. This is something that you're talking about, becoming aware of space and not being claustrophobic. So I'm going to remind our audience, it's very simple. First, become aware of your body. Your body has sensations. And sometimes we just really forget to pay attention to our body. Maybe tighten your shoulders, or bubbly feeling your stomach, or maybe something's coming up right here. Then you become very aware of your thoughts, your cognition, where you, as Diane,
it's okay.
There may be a story, and you can say it's okay. You can, whatever comes to your head. I remember when I started practicing your technique, I had an argument with someone, and I started paying attention to the sensations in my body, and then I literally noticed what I'm saying in my head. It was so ridiculous. And I said, you know what, I'm just going to say it out loud. That's what I'm thinking. I'm like, God, this is,
it's embarrassing.
yes. But I wanted to give it voice also.
Sure, you wanted to be able to really see and hear it. Yeah.
That feeling wanted to communicate. It wanted to be heard and seen, like almost as if it wanted to be seen for its perspective or something like that.
That's good.
And then the rhythmic breath and the rhythmic, dynamic rhythmic breath, either 5 seconds in, 6 seconds, or whatever you choose. Make it rhythmic, and then pay attention to what you're seeing in front of you. Get your focus outward. So 4 simple steps. This is something that can help you deal with triggers, and getting all, emotional during the conflict.
And they don't have to be done in a particular order. It's helpful to do them in an order, because then you learn it. But it may be that you just go to your body first, like you said, and then remind yourself it's okay, right? Or it might be that you start breathing, feeling space, and then you remind yourself it's okay. So just for people to be flexible around the order in which they do them.
Exactly. And then at the same time, you can also breathe. So if you're able to do all 4 of them at the same time, or not in the sequential order, that's good. To me, I try to breathe right away. Breathe, and I'm aware of my feelings. So immediately I let those feelings subside. You talked about your experience being when you married the second time, and you had 3 stepdaughters. I also have stepdaughters.
Oh, do you really? Yeah.
They're grown-ups. They're grown-ups. They're in their 20s. They don't live with us, but I could sort of relate to it. And I remember you in the book, well, not sort of, especially if they're listening, they're amazing. So we actually get along very well. We get along very well. But you talked about the experience of going into your room and really feeling what you're feeling, and trying to understand what's behind these feelings. What's the wisdom, right? These feelings. That it really made so much sense to me.
Yeah. So when I was studying at Naropa Institute, which is where I got my master's degree in Buddhist psychology, we learned a process called the transformation of emotion. And basically, most of us tend to make one of 2 errors. We either avoid feeling altogether, or when we feel, we get hijacked by the feeling. And the feeling becomes kind of truth, as opposed to it being one dimension of truth. And so this process of transmutation, which I think is in both, well, I think it's in all 3 books at some level, is basically to really learn how to let yourself feel. So I would take myself out of a situation where I was angry or really frustrated, and I would just sit down for a few minutes. And as you were pointing out, suspend the story, because the story is usually an extreme version of events. And it's usually very narrow. And often, if you look carefully, that somebody is at fault, somebody is bad, somebody is really wrong. So you just set that aside for a minute and let yourself feel. And it's very similar to what we just described. You feel sensations in the body, tell yourself it's okay. You start using the breath, and that helps to settle the nervous system and relax those really difficult sensations that sometimes impel us to act in ways that are not really in our own best interest or really in the interest of others. We do things that later we wish we hadn't. So if you can create coherence, then you can now bring the cognition back and say, okay, well, what's right about my feelings? And once you've created that coherence in the body, you find that you're telling a different story. It's not that crazy story that you started out with. It's like, well, it's really important for all of us to be in tune with each other. And if we can have certain structures, rather than this is a mad house, no one's listening to anyone else. It's like important for us to hear each other.
Oh, they're disregarding me. They're disregarding me. They're diminishing me. They're this and that.
They don't respect me.
They just, exactly.
They're spoiled, as opposed to, I really would love for us to have an atmosphere of respect and an atmosphere where we're tuned into each other. And then that's a really different message, right?
Yeah, it is. It's a different message. And you come from a more empowered position as opposed to being defeated.
Yeah, and reactive.
Yeah. Diane, I wanted to talk about the power of being multi-perspective and how I've noticed one thing about a little bit about feminine and masculine. And I'm sure most people listening to us understand that there's this inner dynamic within ourselves, mostly the feminine and masculine. And Carl Jung called it anima or animus masculine, animus feminine, I think. And we all have that within ourselves. That's why there's a lot of conversation these days among, the green meme or progressives, right? That there's the gender neutrality or going from one to another and things like that. I feel that even the developmental stages, you can also see there's a bit of feminine, masculine. Let's say on the right side, in the spiral dynamics, we see the community-based purple. Then we move into the blue and the green. These are all kind of feminine qualities.
Yeah, where the well-being of the community is maybe privileged over self. Yeah,
exactly, over self. And the left side is always the red, the orange, where it's always me or perhaps my well-being, my individualism, my perspective,
my successes, my accomplishments, my
exactly. And our goal is to be integral, meaning that we need to migrate from all these views. And for some reason, I feel that this ability of pushing through limits and borders and the power of the surrender, which is considered feminine, I wonder if being multi-perspective, or at least getting to that quality of being multi-perspective, we have to draw upon our feminine quality. What do you think about that? Is there anything to it, or is it both?
Well, let me reiterate what you said in the beginning, because we really do want to make a distinction. So when we use Jung's language of anima or animus, or we use masculine and feminine, part of why we're doing it is because it's a shorthand for a bunch of different traits. So on the feminine side, you could call them receptive skills. And that has to do with being able to listen, to receive, to empathize, to adapt, to surrender, to nurture, to deepen, to kind of move in circles, to create more richness and more depth, to beautify. There's just you can kind of do a big shorthand for what we mean by feminine. What we mean by the masculine is a shorthand for moving in a straight line, like, towards goalposts or baskets or soccer nets or whatever, overcoming limits. It's much more impersonal. It's willing to be challenged, even to receive blows and not to let that bother you, to keep moving in a direction. And even though there's teamwork there's something about the focus being on a goal. We're overcoming the impersonal we're overcoming the personal in order to achieve a goal. It's like, we got to get the ball, we got to get the army, and we've got to get the corporation to this place, which means everybody's going to have to kind of take care of themselves while we achieve this. And so what you're talking about is really kind of the way in which both of those sides are awakened in who we are, and that the side that can actually include multi-perspectives and deal with the tension. Because one of the things that's important for people to understand is, if Elena and I are, let's say we're having a conflict, it's much easier for me to have my point of view and insist that she listen to it. It's harder to see the truth in hers and have mine at the same time. It creates just a tension in the mind and in the body. And so you're right. It's like we have to be a little bit more willing to include. We have to be a little bit more receptive and more patient around how these all work together, because right away they just seem to be in conflict with each other. But men, non-binary people, trans people, women, younger women, older women, all of us have the capacity to do that. But it does tend to fall into the receptive basket of skills.
What do you mean by we all can do that, but it tends to fall in the receptive basket of skills? What do you mean by that?
Well, I mean, it doesn't matter our gender, anybody can be good at multiple perspectives, but it is that more feminine side of our energy that we use when we become multi-perspectival.
Okay.
We're not rushing to a solution. We're actually hearing everything.
Right.
But men, women, and trans people, we're all capable of it. It's just we're using this impulse towards inclusion.
Yeah. Yeah. And there, that's actually the most powerful quality of the feminine, because, you know, I personally myself have been, you know, understanding my own femininity, you know, growing up. I'm in my you know, early 40s, and times when I was disregarding it, actually thinking it was weak, or it was just like, it's not good enough, you know, it's better to achieve and then go for gold and build businesses, and that was so masculine.
You can hear this language, you know, the language of urgency, and the language of going towards a goal, and the language of pushing, you know, that tends to be more.
Mm-hmm. And not only that, but also with that inner masculine, you can defend yourself in such a cruel world. That's why it's so important, you know. And we're talking about the multi-perspective, the feminine. Didn't Dalai Lama say that women could save the world or something like that?
Probably. I heard Mayor Baba said that women are always 4 steps ahead of their men. Have you heard that?
But that's the feminine quality, and this is the feminine quality can actually soothe and save the world from division. I think, because that's your ability to be compassionate and see other people, other perspectives, and feel the surrender is you surrender your surroundings, right? It's let go. It's let go. It's like
you accommodate, you yield, you you know, move in a supportive fashion. As a course,
there's absolute total power in it, because when you do either surrender or see other people's perspectives, the most challenging thing is to feel confident and safe. But we can train ourselves to feel safe while we, in our perspective, we also move into another person's perspectives, or seeing ourselves from a third position, and just kind of migrate from one view and a lens to another, right? So it's the most beautiful thing, and it's the most incredible feminine quality, I feel, that could be trained for women, for men, like you said, anyone, biological women, biological men, trans, absolutely anyone, human beings, right? So thank you so much for that. We only have 12 minutes left, but we have about 20 suggestions here. So we call them suggestions in hypnosis, or affirmations. And these are the kind of affirmations that I'm going to use as I create a 15-minute audio session to help people build confidence and resilience through multiple perspectives when approaching a conflict in your life. And these are the things that I pulled out. So I'll just read some of them. And if some of them have, you know, more charge and you want to say something in comment, we can do that. So the first one is, I'm clear on the intent of my communication as I approach conflict in my life. We already talked about it, the intention, the power of intention. I understand what I want from my communication in conflict as I identify my own needs, wants, and needs along the same lines. I am gentle and soft in my communication and follow a dynamic and rhythmic pace as I speak and express myself freely and with confidence. Something that we talked about already, right?
Sometimes you can choose to be penetrating, and you can choose to be forceful in your speech, but you should do it for a reason. Like sometimes with my own students, I don't ever use that kind of energy until I've told them something repeatedly. And then if I've told them repeatedly, I'll be more forceful. Right.
So I wonder if I can also give it another thought here as well, to be able to gauge when it's time to use more focus and penetration. Okay, so I'll add that one. I realize I realize I'm always safe and secure during all difficult conversations and arguments. This is just to remind ourselves that you are safe. There's no need to run or hide or fight or attack. I am fully aligned and fully present, whether pleasant or unpleasant feelings surface associated with conflict of any kind.
Good.
I use conflict as an opportunity to deepen my relationship to my own body and its sensations.
Very important.
This is something that you've added. What can it do for me as I deepen that?
You can learn how to befriend sensations that feel unfriendly. So the sensations in the body of heat, of rushing, of trembling, usually adrenaline mixed with cortisol, you can tell the stress, the need for movement, or and rather than reacting to those, you can just learn to befriend them. Oh, that's what that is. Yeah.
Yeah. And
my body's feeling threatened, but my mind feels fine.
Exactly. And you can use that simple 4-step in whichever order technique to help you become more comfortable with the sensations and feelings. This is important. Now, I relinquish all blame or need to attack, defend, or self-protect. I stay present, calm, and relaxed. Just that word, relinquishing all blame, because we do tend to get into that blaming mode, right? It's you, it's your fault, you did it, you're doing this to me. So as you relinquish that, you're able to stay calm and relaxed. I'm able to put my own perspective on hold to help me expand my view and gain more wisdom from the perspectives of other people. Talked about that.
Yeah, you can't learn if you don't open up to other people.
But if you really strategically put your perspective on hold, I'm really willing to put it on hold, like on the computer, right? They have windows open, one window's and I'm okay. It's not going to go away. It's not going to run away. My perspective is there.
It's there.
I express my views with freedom, honesty, and depth, and I'm able to listen to others just as equally. This to the point of the one perspective, being able to express your perspective with freedom, right? There's no constriction. There's no one's making me stay silent. I'm free. This is a free world, right? As I actively listen, I am able to stay calm, focused, and pay attention while deepening my awareness. You talked about the power of attention and awareness, all right? Which is, again, like kind of like attention forward, you can say a masculine trait, and awareness.
All-encompassing.
All-encompassing. Women are better. Just kidding.
Unless they've been trained to be men.
Yeah. We I think the importance of to recognize and reconcile these two completely amazing, beautiful parts, whether within a man, biological woman, anyone, because they're both incredible traits that we can recognize and respect. I maintain an equanimity of the mind and stay focused, non-reactive, non-defensive, non-blaming. A bit of repetition, but reinforcing the idea. I'm open to hear, listen, and receive. I can expand and contract. I love this one. This is directly from your book. I can expand and contract my awareness like a camera with multiple lenses, allowing my attention to be wide or diffuse, close up, or from up above. I love that.
Nice. Yeah, very good.
I see from multiple perspectives, and it gives me freedom from pain, confusion, and emotional turmoil associated with disconnect and conflict.
Yeah.
As I become a multi-perspective person, I become wiser, and I see solutions to problems from a more resourceful and kind place from within.
Beautiful. I like that.
I'm able to resolve conflicts in my life with confidence, emotional resilience, and kindness. I'm excited by the energy of conflict and see it as a learning experience always. We need to remind ourselves that it's energy, right?
Yes. Yeah, that's right.
So, and I always ascribe goodwill to other people's motives and use conflict to get to know others better. I really like that one. Yeah, we can get to know other people better if we really pause and ascribe a goodwill to other people's motives.
So, it's not to say that some people don't have negative motives, but the vast majority of people we deal with are coming from what they consider to be a good place.
Yeah, it's and there are times when someone is not coming from good motives, which is very rare. You don't normally encounter it in everyday life.
Right.
But when something like that does happen, something that you may read from the book or watch on television, it's a sad situation, obviously, and it's a hurt and confused and sad situation. Mm-hmm. And we can, as a society, we should find ways to help resolve that. I experience freedom, courage, and compassion when conflicts in my life arise. All right.
That's great. That's a beautiful list. Thank you for coming up with those.
Of course. Thank you for the teachings from your book. So these are the suggestions that I will post below our interview, our conversation, and in some time I'll create an audio session as well, so that people reap the benefits of this incredible work of Diane Musho Hamilton. Get this book. It's really good.
Thank you, everybody.
Yeah, it's not just teachings. They're after each chapter, there are some instructions, which is good, little exercises. And also Diane is sharing her personal life experiences, which makes it even more interesting because you can relate even more and better to the author that you're reading.
Elena, thank you for reaching out to me. I just really appreciate that you did.
I'm honored. I'm really honored. I will add that when I saw you in Rebel Wisdom, I noticed that your voice was very soothing and hypnotic, and I started listening to your talk, and I started watching more videos, and I was just moved and couldn't reach out for too long. It took me 3 years to reach out to you.
Well, as we said, everything in time, right?
Exactly.
Yeah. So also, I should say, just since you listened, is that all those books are also available on Audible. They're audio versions of the books if people prefer.
Great. They can be found on Amazon, correct?
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
Excellent. Again, Diane, thank you so much. I know you're very busy. You are doing the retreat right now. Mm-hmm. So I'm wishing you all the best, beautiful rest of the summer, and I hope to connect again.
Me too. Thanks, Elena.
So.